Hey there, chipmunks! Welcome to the AMP Cycling Ride Review Series. I'm your host, Angry Chipmunk, and today we're in Italy doing the Chia to Teulada route in Sardegna. This ride is available on Rouvy, so let's get right to it. This is a pretty short ride at just under 20 kilometers long with a moderate amount of elevation gain at 382 meters. At such a short distance, it does put the average up to 2% for the entire route, with a max of 11%. There's only one Strava segment included on this route, but there are 4 other hills of note in the ride and several smaller hills as well. The first climb is at the 3.4 kilometer mark. It's just under 1 kilometer long with 54 meters of elevation gain. Some quick gradient math says that this climb averages 6.7% and it peaks at just over 10%. The start is very mellow with the gradients up to 5%. Then they sharpen significantly where you'll see 7 to 10% for several hundred meters for pretty much the rest of the climb. There's a short flatter section at the top which leads to a nice downhill. And as this one is so near the start, it's a good one to push up pretty hard as you do have that downhill after it. There's a bit of mellow up and downhill to the next segment where you'll see the gradients up to 6% before the Strava segment. The Strava segment is Chia to Teulada Road. It's at the 9 kilometer mark, is 2.4 kilometers long with 105 meters of elevation gain. It averages 4.3% with a max of 9.5%. Strava considers this one a Cat 4 climb. The start is super mild with the gradients up to 2.5 to 3% or just under 1 kilometer. The last 1800 meters are not heaps harder, but the gradients do increase quite a bit. You'll mostly be seeing 4 to 7%, but there are a few pinches of 8 to 9%. This isn't an overly difficult or long climb, and just following is another nice downhill section. This is a good climb segment to push a bit harder to try for a good time. There are a few more small bumps to the next hill that won't really exceed 5%. The third climb starts at about the 15.8 kilometer mark, is about 1.3 kilometers long with 75 meters of elevation gain. Some quick math suggests that it averages a gradient of 6%. The climb is shorter but tougher than the actual included segment. Pretty quickly after it turns upwards, you'll be seeing the gradients jump to 6 to 7% and then 9 to 11%. It has a couple of small peaks at 10 and 11% before mellowing again in the middle. You'll be seeing 2.5 to 5% for a few hundred meters before it steepens again to 6 to 9.5% until the summit. Again, there's a nice fast downhill just after the climb before the remaining ascents. There's one small pinch of about 300 meters where you'll again see about 11%. It is a bit mellower on either side, so try to use your momentum to push up this one. The final climb is at the 19.3 kilometer mark, is only about 570 meters long with 37 meters of elevation gain. The math suggests that this small climb has an average of 6.5%. It does follow a nice fast downhill, so be sure to use that to your advantage to make that final push. This one ramps up the further along you'll go, peaking at 10% just about in the middle. The ride ends on a 6% uphill gradient, which is super weird. With the start of this route being so flat for about 3 kilometers, you can get away with less of a warm-up than normal if you want to use the course to warm up. If you want to go hard from the start, I would suggest at least 15 minutes as this is a rather short route. That ending is that weird mid-climb, so you'll want to be having a very good cooldown no matter how hard you pushed. And as always, I recommend pre-fueling your rides with plenty of protein. Since this is a bit of a shorter route, you don't want to overfuel while you're riding it. If you can't pre-fuel, have 15 to 20 grams as you're setting off in the easy part. If you've pre-fueled, aim for a small 10 grams or so around midway. And depending on how hard you're pushing, you may not need to fuel again at all. These shorter routes are tricky to fuel as you don't want to end up overfueling. The climbs are not super difficult here, nor is the distance that great, so there's no real need to follow this one for the protein. A magnesium is helpful though. The view on this ride is pretty great. The entire route is along the southern coast of Sardegna. Frequently the roadside scrub drops away and you get beautiful views of the Mediterranean Sea. There's lots of hills and cliffs with short, robust plants that is common to the seaside. The sun was shining beautifully with a scattering of bright white clouds against the dark blue sky. I went at a moderate pace for this ride, and it took me about 45 minutes to complete on 100% difficulty emulation. With the possibility of deleting the warm-up but still needing a good cooldown, I would say to budget anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes for this one. You could push this one pretty quick for a nice quick ride, but it's also perfectly suitable for a mellow or moderate push. It could be suitable for those with time restraints if you're a fast rider or just need something that's sub 1 hour. Overall, this was a beautiful and fun little ride that I would definitely recommend for most levels of rider. The hills are short and punchy, and with so many in such a short distance, it could be a bit more challenging for a newer rider compared with some other routes. There's always the possibility of spinning them easily, but that can make the time needed to complete the ride blow out a bit. For this route, I give a 5 out of 5. Really great route with some nice uphills and downhills to keep things interesting. For the climbs, 2.5 out of 5 for the segment and 3 out of 5 for all the others. All of the climbs are quite similar with their average gradients around 6% except for the segment. They're not overly difficult, and using the terrain to your advantage can help a lot. For the view, 5 out of 5. I love the views of the Mediterranean Sea here. They're not constantly there, so each time the sea peeks through, you get a fresh reminder of how beautiful it is. And overall, 5 out of 5. Definitely put this one in your ride queue. Well, that's it for this review, so thanks for watching, chipmunks. Please let me know what you thought of the Chia to Teulada route in Sardinia if you complete it. I'll leave you to finish the rest of the ride, and I'll see you next week for another review. Until then, ride on, chipmunks, ride on.